before I joined cleanup, I was with Hasiru Dala. It's an organization that works with waste picker communities and trying to create environmental impact by working in waste management, but working with community of people who are traditionally been working with waste and seeing how when everything in waste is becoming more formal and more professional, how do we make sure that the people who've been working in this field for decades, how do they get kind of involved in this process? They also become more formal, and which also helps in getting more access, getting better working facilities, and recognition for the work that they're doing. Because at the end of the day, I think that's very important when you're working with something that is being the benefit of which is enjoyed by everyone.
How does the waste management system in general work in India?
If you look at the rural India, waste management is not a separate thing that we have to think about because it's quite well managed. If you look at the balance between people and livestock and how they live life, within maybe 25-50 kilometer radius, most of the waste is taken care of. I think what has happened is over the last few decades, like how it's exploded across the world, the plastic usage, which has increased quite a bit, and we don't have a real processing facility that is accessible in every 50 kilometer space. So that really started becoming a huge concern. And that's when the waste management became something that has to be more given out, outsourced, and cannot be managed by people in a community, for example, right? So traditionally, some amount of recycling was always there in India. Like we have this culture of kabadiwalas, who are basically a network of people who are picking. There are informal waste pickers who are waste pickers who just collect waste from the roadside. And then there is this entire chain of people who are having smaller shops, then aggregators who aggregate certain kind of recyclable waste, and that can be glass or paper or plastic. In every category of waste, there is a kabadiwala chain, and it's not only for plastic; it is there for everything. And paper has been there forever because we've always used paper. So paper and cardboard recycling is much more accessible. Similarly, glass recycling is also quite present in many places. Plastic recycling, when it comes to high quality plus higher density plastic, I think there are some amount of recycling that is available. Even in recycling, there is an informal recycling, which is basically recycling done, but not done in a in a safe environment as much as, because recycling is a much more chemical process, needs to be taken care of. So that level of worker or health safety and environment safety standards are not met. So that is one concern. But more importantly, the non-recyclable plastic doesn't have any way out. So this has been traditionally and over every decade, there is some shift that is happening in this recycling industry. And we have reached a point where the larger cities are able to access some of this recycling, but the smaller towns are not able to access this recycling. Now when plastic waste management rules have shifted, and India has also accepted a lot of this, and 2016 we have an official law for plastic waste management. But what happens is that this law did not really consider, laws for the plastic waste and not for the people who are working with the waste. So the people who are working with the waste also need to get included in this law, and which is where organization like Hasiru Dala comes into picture. So they started off with trying to identify or organize informal workers, because without an idea of how many informal workers are there in a city, you can't really shift policies. So that's how they started. Then there was a lot of work to policy changing that work. And what then they did was starting getting involved in waste management services with waste pickers, and how do we create predictable livelihood opportunities with this. So that became like a more replicable, scalable business model. And that's where I worked mostly, in trying to scale and increase the number of opportunities and number of waste pickers who can get benefits out of working with waste.
Basically, the way that I understand it is, in earlier times, waste management was not much of an issue because a lot of waste was organic waste. There was little material in there that was basically not natural or biodegradable. And the waste types that are valuable, like paper, carpet, etc., people would collect because they can make income from that. Okay. And can you just explain in a bit more detail the difference between informal and formal workers?
Yeah. So when you say formal working, it is basically people where all the laws of the state for workers and for the staff and for the facility are taken care of end to end. So, for example, if you're working in a private limited company, then there are laws of the state that govern how you are paying wages for the workers, how you are creating a work environment for the workers, where is your office located. When it comes to an informal working system, most of these things are not fully compliant. First of all, the registration itself will not be as per what is actually required, and the workers are not always under payroll, so they're not getting minimum wages as per the state. And there are, like in every sector, so waste management is one sector where there is informal workers, but there are informal workers in construction, informal workers in other sectors of in India, and each of these informal workers suffer some or the other kind of oppression from the systems which are trying to cut costs or make profit or just be able to get away from compliance. And that is where the informal worker, so to say. And the other thing that comes with informal workers is that it's very difficult to identify how many informal workers are there in a sector, because there is no governing body that is actually having a list of the number of workers in each organization, because people are not taking them into official payroll. So you're getting paid, but you're getting paid without really being enrolled into this. And that is a problem which is very systemic in India, because we've always had this idea of help around the house or things that are being there's a social societal issue that we have a lot of people who agree to work just for getting money because of the poverty that is there, and hence they're not aware of the benefits, and they don't get those benefits that you could get if you're working in a formal setup.
Basically, there's then two issues, right? It's like there's new waste streams that are emerging where there's no real access to proper treatment. Yeah. And the other thing is that there's also social challenges involved. Who are the people typically working in waste management?
So waste management in India, at least, is people working in waste are there are two kinds. So if you take in an urban scenario, there are people who have been working in the waste management line for at least a couple of generations, and they are communities who have been around in a city and who have so here there is this issue of where we have this caste system, and there are the Dalit people who generally work a lot more in the waste management field. And then the second thing in an urban scenario or in most places are migrant workers. Migrant workers are workers who are not locally staying in a particular location, but are staying in some other part of the country, and they want to travel for better employment opportunities or better earning possibilities, because either they are not having much land to do agriculture, or they've come because they feel that a city will have this kind of better opportunities. So I don't know if you can hear my niece. So then they come in here, and then they waste management becomes one of the easiest route where you can enter without a lot of different skills. And that has been the way that people are working in waste management. And but mostly we see that in the social strata, again, the lower caste people are the people who mostly work in waste. The upper caste people do not. Actually, I don't think anybody would prefer to work in waste as is. Like, it's a lot. At least with the facilities that are there today. As things improve, and if you look at a formal recycling facility, I don't think these problems exist. It is only in the informal working system that all of these problems exist, because of the lack of facilities and benefits. If the facilities and benefits are in place, you have a clean working environment, and you're able to get benefits like any working person, then I don't think these kind of preferences will really play out. But yeah, today that's the reality.
And maybe you can talk a bit more about then what Hasirudala did to change, or how they change.
So I think a couple of things that Hasirudala did very differently was one, being able to just get people to come together as a community, and really look at policy level changes that can happen. So that in Bangalore, there are few cities in India that really made a huge shift in waste management. Bangalore is one of the cities where we have a rule for segregated waste at household and any place. And after having a policy level change, we really started working on trying and getting more and more waste pickers to work for the city's waste. So having the city's governance understand that there are so many people working in waste already, and they need to be involved in the entire system. So we have a decentralized waste management system, and the recyclable waste comes for every geographical location, ward we call it. We have 192 wards, and each of those wards will have a recycling waste center. We call it dry waste collection center, and that entire operation is preferably done by people who are identified as waste pickers. So Hasirudala helped in creating this identity card, where people from communities can really get this identity card, which helps them get access to these centers and working of these centers. So that was almost 3 years of work to get all of these things done. But the number of waste pickers in a city like Bangalore is 30 to 40,000. So just having 4-5 people working in 200 odd centers will hardly make a impact. So we really needed scalable solutions where the city's waste is much higher than that. And a lot of collection effort is required, and a lot of processing effort is required. And so we thought that having a more predictable, having a more formalized livelihood option, which is more predictable, that kind of helps. So we set up this thing where we could help collection of waste from large apartments and commercial buildings, again segregated waste, and ensure and creating this partnership model where there is a set of waste pickers who have their go down, the place where they sort waste, so to say, and how they can create their own mini enterprise and collect waste from. So we create the agreement between the customer and us, and the waste management unit becomes our partner on the field, and they run the operation, and then we ensure that things are much more in place for them when it comes to the kind of waste that they get, and also they get paid a certain fee for doing it, and they also own the recyclable waste, so they can completely take a call how they want to sell it, where they want to sell it. And we started getting into value addition of the waste. So because what happens is that the people who collect the waste get the least in the entire supply chain of waste management. The people who recycle the waste get the highest profit. So then we wanted to see how we can get involved in slightly more in an aggregation manner, or possibly in a recycling manner, so that the middlemen who are in the waste management supply chain can be reduced. So yeah, this is how much work I was involved with.
maybe you can explain a bit more about why segregation of waste is so important.
Okay, so segregation of waste is basically how we look at it is like minimum segregating the biodegradable waste and the non-biodegradable waste, but we also look at segregating out the sanitary waste and waste that absolutely is cannot be worked with. So at least, so that's how we are looking at segregation. The reason why it is very important is that uh, the amount of waste that gets dumped as a mixed waste, that is waste that is all put together, is so huge that that it becomes impossible to really work to retrieve any recyclable waste. So we have a existing industry on for recyclable waste. We have an existing industry for would you say for paper, plastic, metal, and glass. That at least we have, right? But then if it gets mixed with biodegradable waste or any other waste, then even even the things that can be recycled will not reach that chain at all. So hence segregation of waste is very important. Secondly, it's very important because when you're at this point in time, we have not yet reached a level where we can use machinery for collection of waste. We still have a lot of manual intervention, right from collection of the waste at the doorstep to actually working in a recycling till it reaches a recycling facility. We have a lot of human beings directly working with waste. And we also have a lot of people in general. So replacing people with for automation is something that I think will come maybe in many years. At this point, we really have a lot of people working with waste. So if you have mixed waste, it becomes very difficult to even work with waste because it's not hygienic, and second, it just makes that work so much more difficult because the kind of space that they have to work in, the kind of protection that they'll need for managing waste, it becomes very difficult. So I think because of all of that, the segregation is an absolute must. We have to segregate waste at a household level, but that's the biggest problem that we face. We have laws in place, but the implementation of the enforcing of the law is very, very weak. So we face a problem across the country. Even a big city, we face a problem. It's comparatively better, but across the country, we have a problem with segregation of waste. It's not yet part of our awareness. We still have understanding it, and we're not able to make that as a norm everywhere. And the other biggest challenge that we have is that even if you segregate the waste, the collection facilities that are there across the country is very different because there are again another challenge, right? We have a diversity is so huge in people, in culture, in geography, in infrastructure, in different places. So it becomes very challenging to really implement something that can be done the same way across the country. So there are guiding rules, and based on the guiding rules, local governance system has to come up with actual working practical solutions, and that is taking a lot of time. So it's we are not being able to implement all those things. So our collection systems are weak, our awareness for segregation is weak, and then if you have segregated waste and we have collected it, then what do you do with all this collected segregated waste, right? So if you have a lot of paper or cardboard, maybe they are able to manage it somewhere close by, but the more amount of plastic or more number of non-recyclable waste that comes in, we don't have facilities that are close by. So when the most of the facilities are closer to maybe larger cities or larger industrial areas, because these kind of recyclings are very large industrial units. So then the distance comes into picture, and then so if you have a rural setup in a very remote place, and if you have to travel through terrains which are so difficult and reach a recycling unit which is 100-200 kilometers away, it is discouraging if at the end of it you're not even getting paid. So the easiest thing that anyone would think is that I'm not going to use this waste, so throw it. and somebody who can, who is in such a dire state in their life, who has absolutely no way of making money anywhere else, will have to dig through this waste and retrieve things that are usable. And that is what happens in many of the rural or smaller towns. There are land dumps, and there are people who are working over there, not really employed there, but are just going and picking up waste from there and selling it off into kabadi wala shop and making money. So that's and we find we don't even need official land dump because of the mixed waste problem. We find waste being dumped off roads, off highways. There are very localized dumps also. So the enforcement has a very long way to go. There's some amount of enforcement in the middle center area of cities, but yeah, we have a long way to go.
I remember from the trip that I took. A lot of things that you just said were completely new to me. You know, in the household where I lived, nobody really knew what's going to happen to the waste that they put into the bin. And then we visited some of those land dumps where waste was just put onto agricultural land or whatever without any sort of protection. What shocked me personally the most, and this was when I then also recalled other trips that I took to different countries, is these landfills were just put on fire also to reduce the waste volume, and that's obviously a huge threat for the environment. And what I saw a lot is that people also burn their waste in the backyard or at the front door, like next to their little shop or whatever. A lot of micro incineration going on, which is quite shocking. At the same time, exactly the situation that you just described was like I saw people living on landfills. Right? It's like even little villages basically erected on landfills where people would sort through the waste, and that kind of brings me to the second question that I wanted to ask is, for me, when going there and observing this situation, I was like, everybody would be super happy to work in a better system, basically, right? Yeah. When talking to people doing their job, one thing that came up quite regularly is that that not everybody wants to go into a formalized system, right? There's a certain resistance to doing that, and that was super counterintuitive. Maybe you can shine a bit of light on that. Say, why do you think, or what are the challenges basically from lifting someone from this informal to formal work relationship?
I think there are different levels of awareness, right? In the sense that, firstly, like most of the people who are working in such places, they're not introduced to any kind of formal system. So be it education or be it health or be it a way in the that the community or the state or anybody accepts them, that kind of a systemic way is not there. So they don't understand and they don't trust that going into a formal system would really be a difference, because like if I have to take the simplest of examples, right? So there's this person who comes to my house to help clean house, and she does not have a bank account, and I would keep telling her, like, have a bank account, it will become really helpful for you. And the biggest thing that she felt was that in a bank she can't enter because a bank will not allow her to enter, and that's her perception of the bank, because a formal system is quite alien when it comes to people who are working on the field or on the ground, and especially people who are working as waste pickers. There's a lot of general thing that world is not my world and I don't trust that world. So if I have to work with that world, then why should I? Because they just don't understand me, and you're just this elite city person who's coming and saying that you'll change my world, and you don't know anything about me and how I live. So why do I trust you? I might as well trust a person who's in my village and who's around me and understands me more. So I felt that one of the biggest challenges, that there's a huge trust issue in how to how do we really get them to trust us and say that, okay, a formal system is going to really change the way you do things. And the second thing I think that comes up in the informal system, however bad it is extremely flexible, extremely flexible. So if a waste picker, the waste pickers that we used to work with, one of the biggest thing that they would, like, we would try to get them jobs. And when we try to get them jobs, the biggest thing is that if they have some festival or they have some celebration at home, they would take a week off, 10 days off. And they'll say, yeah, if we have to come back, we'll come back. Otherwise, we will not come back. And you will be like, okay, yeah, but then there is this thing and we trained you and you need to like do this. And if you come, you really get your salary. And they're like, it's okay, I don't want the salary. And so I guess when you are an informal waste picker, you get up in the morning, you feel like going, you go. You don't feel like going, you don't go. And you work till 4 o'clock in the morning, it's okay. You work at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, it's okay. And it allows a certain kind of ownership to your life and a way that they live, that they feel that a formal system is too restricting and you have too many rules and I don't want to live by those rules. And it's a perception, and it changes as people get into say, like as their kids get more educated or as they start looking at jobs that allow a little bit more formal engagement, then this perception changes. But the initial times to make the shift and to make the transition, I think these are two things that I felt there would be many, but like on top of my mind, what I have like had long conversations on are these. Like I would have long conversations on coming on time. It would be it's one of the most amazing conversations where I've questioned myself as to what am I trying to do, because I would really love to live like that and have such a flexible life. But I'm convincing somebody that you have to turn up on time because you have to work on waste, which comes at a certain time. So
okay, that's very interesting. So very small details, also at the same time a lot of complexity in the system itself.
Yes. But the trust is the biggest thing, and it's very difficult to really get over the trust thing unless you work so closely with them and prove in. I guess that with generations of oppression, there's a lot of experiences that has made it very difficult for them to trust. And I guess like across, I think as a developing nation itself, like I can say, even if I'm from a city, there's a certain amount of distrust when it comes to like in general developed nation, because I guess of the colonial experience or the stories you've heard of colonial experience. So I'm guessing it is more and more true when it comes to people who are really living off just stories that I've heard.
What are your personal goals with CleanHub? Like besides anything that would go into business and growth and like.
So it's so all my time when I was in Hasirudala, I was a field partner equivalent, where I'm working on the field and trying to get environmental and social impact happening on the field. I think for me personally, learning how a systemic push can happen because of the ability of working in an organization that has the edge of I think financial power at least, one, and edge of having access to a lot more knowledge, and that I think will personally help me a lot to grow in this system and say how can we create a sustainable change and create something that is, I think, like if more people can learn from us and become like this, I think that will be like amazing, really, really amazing.
Perfect. Yeah, then let's go at it. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you.